I spent 30 years building my dream beach house from nothing, a waterfront paradise meant for family memories with my grandchildren. Then my daughter-in-law, Bree, decided I was too old-fashioned to be around her kids and cut me off completely. For 2 years, I missed birthdays, holidays, and watching them grow. Then suddenly she called, voice dripping with sweetness, asking if they could use my beach house for their summer vacation. She needed my property, but didn't think I deserved to see my own grandchildren. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What she didn't realize was that I'd been waiting for this moment, and the keys to my house came with conditions that would change everything. It was always my dream to have a place by the ocean. Growing up in a small apartment in the city with parents who worked double shifts, vacations were something other families enjoyed. I promised myself that someday I'd have a home where the sound of waves would be the first thing I'd hear each morning, a place where family could gather, where memories would be built layer by layer like the seashells that wash up on shore. I'm Susan Caldwell, and for 42 years I worked as a pediatric nurse. I started as a young woman of 23, fresh out of nursing school, saving every extra penny I could. Even during my marriage to David, who taught high school science, we lived modestly. One day, I'd tell him as we'd look through coastal property listings we couldn't afford. One day we'll wake up to the sound of the ocean. David would smile, squeeze my hand, and say, "I believe you, Susie. If anyone can make it happen, it's you." When David passed away from a sudden heart attack 15 years ago, I was devastated. Our son Austin was already in college, and I found myself alone in a house that suddenly felt too empty, too quiet. Grief counselors tell you not to make major decisions after losing someone. But I needed purpose. I needed a goal that would pull me forward when all I wanted was to sink. So I took our modest life insurance money, sold our suburban home, moved into a small apartment, and put everything else into buying a rundown property on the North Carolina coast. It wasn't much, just a weathered cottage with peeling paint and rotting deck boards, but it was mine, and it had the view I'd always promised myself. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Austin had asked, concern written across his face when he saw the property for the first time. He was 20 then, practical and cautious like his father. "I've never been more certain of anything," I told him. "I can fix this place up little by little. It gives me something to work toward." And that's exactly what I did. For 15 years, I continued my nursing career, working extra shifts whenever I could. Every dollar that didn't go to necessities went into that house. I learned to sand floors, on my days off, to replace window frames, to weatherproof siding. Local contractors got used to seeing me, this middle-aged and then older woman, asking detailed questions, buying materials myself to save money, doing whatever work I could handle on my own. "You're something else, Susan," my neighbor Joe would say, shaking his head as he'd find me on a ladder, painting trim or cleaning gutters. Most people retire to relax, but transforming that house wasn't work to me. It was healing. With each improvement, each repair, I felt like I was building something for the future. David might not be there to share it, but our son would have a place to bring his family someday. Our legacy wouldn't end with David's death. When Austin met Bree during his final year of law school, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, ambitious, finishing her MBA. They seemed perfect together, both driven, both intelligent. When he brought her to the beach house for the first time, I had just finished the kitchen renovation. "This place is gorgeous," Bree had said, running her hand along the new quartz countertops I'd saved 3 years to install. "The location is incredible. Beachfront property like this must be worth a fortune now." "It's not about the money," Saki explained. "It's about building something that lasts, something for family." She'd smiled at that, but looking back, I should have noticed how her eyes kept assessing, evaluating, like she was mentally calculating square footage and property values. Rather than seeing the love built into every corner, Austin and Bree married a year later. I wore blue to match the ocean, I'd told them, and danced with my son under string lights on the same beach I could see from my porch. When Bree announced she was pregnant just 6 months later, I felt like my heart might burst with joy. "You're going to be such a wonderful grandmother," Austin had said, hugging me tight as tears streamed down my face. Sola came first, named after Bree's grandmother, a beautiful baby girl with Austin's thoughtful eyes. Then, 2 years later, little Carlos, named after Bree's father. With each birth, I took weeks off work to help, cooking, cleaning, holding babies while Bree rested or showered. Those early days were harmonious, filled with the exhausted joy that comes with new life. I finished the upstairs bedrooms of the beach house then, one with soft pink walls for Sola, one with a hand-painted mural of the ocean for Carlos. Bunk, beds for when they'd be older, rocking chairs by the windows, bookshelves filled with the stories I'd read to Austin as a child. "Mom, you didn't need to do all this," Austin had said, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "Of course I did," I'd replied. "Grandma's house should be a magical place." For the first few years, it was exactly as I'd imagined. They'd visit every few months. We'd build sandcastles, collect shells, roast marshmallows by the fire pit I'd installed specifically for those moments. I taught Sola how to identify different shells, showed Carlos how to spot dolphins from the deck in the early morning light. The shift happened so gradually, I barely noticed it beginning. Bree started finding reasons they couldn't visit quite. So often, when they did come, she'd watch with tight lips as I played with the children. "Please don't give them sweets before dinner," she'd say, or, "We don't use those outdated phrases in our house." Then came the comments when she thought I couldn't hear. "Your mother is from a different generation," she'd tell Austin. "She doesn't understand modern parenting." I tried to adapt. I read the parenting books Bree not so subtly left out when they visited. I asked questions about their routines, their rules, trying to understand this new approach that seemed to judge everything I'd done raising Austin as wrong. Then came the visit where everything changed. Sola, 5 at the time, had fallen and scraped her knee on the patio. When she came crying to me, I did what came naturally after 40 years as a pediatric nurse. I cleaned the wound, applied a bandage, and kissed it better. Bree had appeared, in the doorway, face flushed with anger. "What are you doing? We don't kiss injuries better. It sends the wrong message about pain and bodies." You were just undermining our parenting, as usual." That night, I overheard their argument. From the porch, Austin's voice pleading for understanding, Bree's growing increasingly firm. "It's my job to protect them from outdated influences," she'd said. "Your mother refuses to respect our boundaries." They left a day early, and after that, everything changed. 2 weeks after that disastrous visit, Austin called. His voice sounded strained, uncomfortable, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. "Mom, Bree and I have been talking, and we think we need to take a break from visits for a while." My heart nearly stopped. A break? What does that mean exactly? Just some time to establish our family routines without outside influences. Outside influences? "Austin, I'm your mother, not some stranger off the street." I heard muffled voices in the background, and when Austin spoke again, his tone was firmer. "This isn't a discussion, Mom. We need to do what's best for our children." Can I at least call them? Read Sola a bedtime story over the phone like we used to? Another pause, more muffled conversation. "No calls for now. We'll let you know when we're ready." That single phone call turned my world upside down. The children who had been central to my life, who I'd built rooms for, collected seashells with, read stories to, were suddenly off limits. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No explanation beyond vague references to boundaries and parenting differences. In the days that followed, I moved through my beach house like a ghost. The rooms that had once echoed with children's laughter now felt cavernous, empty. I'd stand in the doorway of Sola's pink bedroom or Carlos's ocean-themed room, touching the little mementos they'd left behind, a hair ribbon, a toy car, a drawing taped to the wall, and wonder if they would ever sleep there again. People who haven't experienced this kind of family estrangement can't understand the particular cruelty of it. It's not just the absence of loved ones, it's the ambiguity, the lack of closure. Death, as painful as it is, has rituals, ceremonies, a finality that allows the grieving process to begin. This was different, a living loss, an open wound that couldn't heal because I kept hoping tomorrow would bring reconciliation. I'd spent my life as a caregiver, both professionally and personally. As a pediatric nurse for over 40 years, I had comforted countless children and reassured worried parents. I'd raised Austin alone after David died, balancing grief and single parenthood while maintaining a career. I'd renovated the beach house largely by myself, learning skills most women my age never attempted. Problem solving was in my nature. When faced with difficulties, I fixed them. But this situation left me powerless. Every attempt at communication was rebuffed or ignored. I sent birthday cards that received no acknowledgement. I mailed carefully, chosen Christmas gifts, not knowing if they ever reached the children. I left voicemails for Austin that went unreturned. Once, in desperation, I even drove to their house in Charlotte, only to sit in my car across the street, watching the front door but too afraid of making things worse to approach. My friend Edith tried to help. We'd met years ago through hospital volunteer work, and she'd become my closest confidant after David passed. "You need to give them space," she advised over coffee on my deck one afternoon, about 3 months into the estrangement. "They'll come around eventually." "But what if they don't?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if Bree convinces Austin to keep the children from me permanently?" Edith, who had navigated her own complicated family dynamics over the years, reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Children remember, Susan. Even if their parents try to erase you, Sola and Carlos will remember their grandmother who loves shells and makes blueberry pancakes and knows how to spot dolphins at dawn." I tried to find comfort in that, but as weeks turned to months and months to a year, even my optimism began to falter. I threw myself into community work, volunteering at the local hospital, teaching craft classes at the senior center, anything to fill the gaping hole in my life. The beach house, once my pride and joy, became almost painful to maintain. What was the point of keeping up bedrooms no children used? Why bother repainting the deck furniture when no one but me would sit there? But I couldn't let it deteriorate. It represented too many years of hard work, too many dreams of family gatherings. So I kept going through the motions. I repaired storm damage, planted flowers in the spring, raked leaves in the fall. I continued, improving and maintaining the property as if preparing for visitors who never came. As a nurse, I'd learned that healing isn't always linear. Some wounds take unexpected turns, require different treatments than initially prescribed. I began to approach my family estrangement with the same clinical mindset, observing, adjusting, trying new approaches when old ones failed. I joined a support group for estranged grandparents, finding solace in the stories of others who understood this peculiar pain. Some had found their way back to their families. Others had been cut off for decades. Their experiences helped me recognize that this wasn't unusual in modern families, that I wasn't alone in my struggle. Through these connections, I met Erica, a family law attorney who specialized in grandparents' rights. Over lunch one day, she explained the legal realities of my situation. In North Carolina, Grandparents have limited rights to visitation, she told me. The courts generally defer to parents' decisions unless there's evidence that the children are being harmed by the lack of contact. They are being harmed, I insisted. They're being deprived of a loving relationship. Erica's smile was sympathetic but pragmatic. I know, Susan, but legally speaking, that's not enough. Courts are reluctant to override parental authority. So, I have no recourse at all? I didn't say that. There are other approaches: mediation, family counseling, carefully worded communications that acknowledge their concerns while asserting your desire for connection. Legal action should be the last resort, not the first. I took her advice to heart. I enrolled in a modern parenting course online, hoping to better understand Bree's perspective. I wrote careful, non-confrontational emails to Austin, acknowledging their authority as parents while expressing my continued love for the children. I sent modest gifts on appropriate occasions with notes that made no demands, just simple expressions of love, all met with silence. By the time the second Christmas without them approached, I had settled into a resigned routine. I volunteered for holiday shifts at the hospital, so I wouldn't have to sit alone in my house with its empty children's rooms and unused toys. I bought gifts for Sola and Carlos but stored them in the closet, uncertain if I'd ever have the chance to give them. That's when the unexpected happened. A text message from Austin on a cold December evening that would set in motion everything that followed. The text from Austin was brief, almost casual, as if we hadn't gone nearly 2 years with minimal contact. Hey Mom, how have you been? Been thinking about you. Hope the beach house is holding up. I stared at those words on my phone screen for a long time, my heart racing. After months of unanswered messages, this simple text felt momentous. I read it over and over, analyzing each word, searching for hidden meanings or clues to his motivation. I waited a full day before responding, not wanting to appear too eager. I'm doing well. The house is in good shape. Just had the deck refinished last month. How are you all? How are the children? His reply came that evening. We're good. Kids are growing fast. Sola's into marine biology now. Keeps talking about wanting to see tide pools. Carlos is obsessed with building things. Marine biology. Tide pools. Construction. These small details about my grandchildren were like water after a drought. I savored them, trying to picture 7-year-old Sola poring over books about sea creatures, 5-year-old Carlos constructing towers with blocks or Legos. Our text exchange continued over the next few days, pleasant but superficial, carefully, avoiding any mention of the rift between us. Austin shared a few recent photos of the children, Sola with her hair cut in a neat bob, Carlos missing his 2 front teeth. I studied their faces hungrily, noting how much they'd changed in 2 years, how they looked both familiar and like strangers. I wanted to ask the obvious question, why now, after all this time? But feared breaking the fragile connection we'd reestablished. So I waited, responding enthusiastically to his messages, sending photos of dolphins I'd spotted from my deck, mentioning casual details about my life that might interest the children. Week into this careful dance of reconnection, Austin finally broached the real subject. Mom, we've been thinking about summer vacation plans. The kids keep asking about the beach. My pulse quickened. Was he suggesting what I thought he was? The beach is beautiful in summer, I replied neutrally. Lots of great shells after the spring storms. That's what I remember, he wrote back. Listen, Bree and I were wondering if we might be able to use the beach house for a couple weeks in July. The kids would love it, and frankly, beachfront rentals are through the roof these days. There it was, the request I'd been both hoping for and dreading. They wanted my house, but the careful wording suggested they didn't necessarily want me. I set my phone down and walked out onto the deck, needing the calming presence of the ocean. The January wind whipped at my sweater as I leaned against the railing, watching waves crash onto the shore. This house, this view, I'd worked so hard to create this place, envisioning it filled with family, with laughter, with love. Now I was being asked to offer it up while potentially remaining excluded from their lives. Back inside, I called Erica. As both my lawyer and friend, she'd understand the complexity of what I was facing. "This is actually good news," she said after I explained the situation. "They've opened the door to communication. Now you have leverage to negotiate." "I don't want to use my home as a bargaining chip," I objected. "That feels manipulative." "Susan," Erica's voice was gentle but firm, "they've been manipulating you for 2 years by withholding the children. This isn't about revenge. It's about establishing healthy boundaries moving forward." She was right, of course. If I simply handed over the keys without any discussion of our relationship, nothing would change. I'd still be an outsider, permitted access to my grandchildren only when convenient for Bree and Austin. Before responding to Austin's text, I spent days reflecting on what I truly wanted. Not just for that summer, but for the future. I wasn't getting any younger. At 68, I was acutely aware that time with my grandchildren was precious and limited. If there was ever a moment to stand up for myself, for my place in their lives, this was it. Finally, I texted Austin back. "I'd love for you all to enjoy the beach house this summer. It would be wonderful to see the children again after so long. When were you thinking of visiting?" His response came quickly. "July 10th, 24, if that works. It would be great for the kids to see you too. Maybe you could come for dinner one night while we're there." One dinner. After 2 years of separation, I was being offered a single evening with my grandchildren in my own home. I took a deep breath, then typed, "I'd be happy to have you all stay at the beach house. As for seeing the children, I think we need to have a more substantial conversation about that. Could we talk on the phone this weekend?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Sure, Mom. How about Saturday at 10? When Saturday arrived, I was prepared. I'd consulted with Erica again, made notes about what I wanted to express, even rehearsed in front of the mirror to ensure I could speak without my voice breaking with emotion. Austin called precisely at 10. After brief pleasantries, I dove in. "Austin, before we discuss your summer visit, I need to understand what happened. 2 years ago, I went from being an involved grandmother to being completely cut out of the children's lives. No explanation, no opportunity to address concerns, just silence." He sighed heavily. "Mom, you know Bree had issues with your approach to the kids. You weren't respecting our parenting decisions." "What decisions specifically?" "I've spent 2 years trying to understand what I did that was so terrible it warranted losing contact with my grandchildren. It wasn't one thing, Mom. It was a pattern. The sweets before dinner, the outdated gender expectations, the way you'd undermine our authority." Each accusation was vague, insubstantial. I waited for specific examples, but none came. "Austin, I've always been willing to learn, to adapt. If you had told me what behaviors were concerning you, I would have changed them. Instead, you cut me off completely." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, in a softer voice, Austin said, "I know it wasn't fair. Things just escalated. Bree was struggling with a lot of anxiety about parenting, and it was easier to create distance than to manage the conflicts." This was the most honest acknowledgement I'd received in 2 years. "I understand that relationships can be complicated," I said carefully. "But I need you to understand something too. I've missed 2 years of Sola and Carlos's lives. 2 years of birthdays, holidays, everyday moments that I can never get back. I'm not willing to miss any more." "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm saying that if you want to use the beach house this summer, I need to be included as part of the family, not as an occasional dinner guest in my own home." Silence filled the phone line after my declaration. I could almost see Austin's expression, that same look of conflicted surprise he'd worn as a teenager when I'd finally stand firm after too many broken curfews. "Mom," he finally said, his voice careful, measured. "I understand you're upset about the past 2 years. We can talk about more regular contact going forward, but I think you're being a bit extreme." "Extreme?" I repeated, the word burning in my throat. Is wanting to be treated as part of the family extreme? Is not wanting to be a stranger to my own grandchildren extreme? That's not what I meant. He sounded flustered now. "Look, we want to use the beach house and we're happy to include you in some activities. But Bree has concerns about overwhelming the kids if you're too present too quickly." Too present in my own home? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "Austin, do you hear yourself?" Another silence, then, "Let me talk to Bree and call you back." After we hung up, I paced the deck, my emotions cycling between righteous anger and nagging self-doubt. Was I being unreasonable? Was I risking this fragile reconnection by standing my ground? But the alternative, accepting crumbs of time with my grandchildren, being a visitor in the home I'd built, felt like another kind of loss. My phone rang 30 minutes later, but it wasn't Austin's name on the screen. It was Bree's. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Bree." Susan. Her voice was cool, controlled, the professional tone she used in business negotiations. "Austin told me about your concerns." "I wouldn't call them concerns, Bree. I'm simply stating what I need for this arrangement to work for everyone. I understand you feel entitled to time with the children," she said, the word entitled carrying a subtle sting. "It's not about entitlement. It's about rebuilding relationships that were unnecessarily damaged." I kept my voice steady, refusing to be baited into an emotional response. "The past is the past," she dismissed. "We're trying to move forward constructively. The children are in a good place now, with consistent routines and expectations. 2. Much change too quickly could be disruptive." "Bree," I said carefully, "they haven't seen their grandmother in 2 years. That's the disruption. Reconnecting with family isn't chaos, it's healing. I think we have different perspectives on what's best for them." Her tone remained detached, clinical. "Maybe so. But they're my grandchildren, and this is my home. I've respected your decisions as parents, even when they broke my heart. Now I'm asking for some respect in return." I heard her take a sharp breath. "What exactly are you saying, Susan?" "I'm saying that I'm willing to host your family this summer, but I won't be excluded from family activities in my own home. I won't be relegated to occasional, supervised visits like some kind of threat. And if we're not comfortable with those terms?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. "Then perhaps my home isn't the right setting for your vacation." The line went silent, but I could hear her breathing. Quick, controlled breaths that suggested she was holding back stronger words. "Let me be perfectly clear," she finally said. "We're offering you a chance to reconnect gradually with the children. If you choose to make this difficult, that opportunity might not come again." The threat hung between us. 2 years ago, it would have worked. I would have backed down, afraid of losing what little access I was being offered. But something had shifted in me. Perhaps it was 2 years of grief, of reflection, of support. Group meetings where I'd heard story after story of grandparents who regretted not standing stronger, sooner. "I understand," I said quietly. "And let me be clear in return. I'm offering you use of my home, which I've spent decades building, maintaining, and paying for. If you choose to make this difficult, that opportunity might not come again either." I hadn't planned to be so direct, but Bree's coldness had triggered something in me. A protective instinct, not just for myself, but for the proper role of a grandmother in children's lives. "I see." Her voice turned frigid. "Well, we certainly wouldn't want to impose where we're not fully welcome." "That's not what I said, Bree." You're all welcome, as a family, which includes me. I'm simply not offering my home as a vacation property while continuing to be estranged from my grandchildren. I think we're done here, she snapped. I'll discuss alternatives with Austin. The call ended abruptly. I set down my phone, hands shaking slightly. I'd stood my ground, but at what cost? Had I just destroyed the fragile bridge being built back? To Sola and Carlos? I called Edith immediately, needing a friendly voice to counter the doubts swirling in my mind. You did the right thing, she assured me after I recounted the conversation. They were trying to use your home without addressing the real issue. If you'd agreed to their terms, nothing would change. But what if they decide not to come at all? What if this pushes them further away? Then you'd be in exactly the same position you're in now, she pointed out pragmatically. Except you'd know you stood up for yourself instead of allowing them to take advantage of your love for the children. She was right, but the hours that followed were still agonizing. I waited for a call or text from Austin, checking my phone obsessively. By evening, when no communication had come, I tried to distract myself by tackling a house project I'd been putting off, regrouting the kitchen backsplash. Physical labor had always been my therapy, the methodical process of fixing, improving, creating something tangible, a balm for emotional turmoil. 2 days passed in silence. I told myself this was positive. They were discussing, considering, perhaps even recognizing the unfairness of their position. But as a third day dawned with no word, my optimism began to waver. Then, just as I was preparing dinner, my phone chimed with a text notification. Austin. Mom, can we talk? This is important. My heart raced as I typed back. Of course, call whenever you're ready. The phone rang less than a minute later. I answered on the first ring, trying to keep my voice calm, neutral. Austin? Mom. His voice sounded different, tense but determined. I've been thinking about everything, about the last 2 years, about what you said. I waited, hardly daring to breathe. You're right, he continued, the words seeming to rush out now. We handled things badly, very badly, and I'm sorry. Of all the responses I'd imagined, a straightforward apology hadn't been among them. For a moment, I was speechless. I'm listening, I said, once I'd recovered from the surprise of Austin's apology. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he continued. After you and Bree spoke, we had a long talk. Probably the most honest conversation we've had about family in years. I settled into my favorite chair, overlooking the ocean. What happened? I realized I've been taking the path of least resistance. It was easier to go along with Bree's concerns than to stand up for your place in our family. His voice cracked slightly. I justified it as supporting my wife, but the truth is, I was being a coward. Outside my window, a pair of gulls soared, on the evening breeze, dipping and rising in perfect synchronicity. The sight reminded me of how relationships should be, a dance of mutual respect and accommodation, not one person always yielding to another. What changed? I asked. Sola asked about you again last night. She found an old photo album and wanted to know why you weren't in any recent pictures. When I tried to explain, all my justifications sounded hollow. He paused. And then Bree told me about your conversation. She expected me to be angry with you, but instead I found myself questioning everything we've done these past 2 years. Hope flickered in my chest, but I tempered it with caution. I appreciate that, Austin. Truly. But where does this leave us? We still want to come to the beach house this summer. But you're right, you should be included, not as an occasional visitor, but as part of the family. The relief that washed over me was so intense it brought tears to my eyes. That means more to me than you know. There's more, he continued. I think we need to start rebuilding our relationship before summer. Maybe a video call with the kids this weekend? They'd love to see you. A video call. Such a simple thing, yet it represented a monumental shift. I'd love that. And Mom? Bree wants to talk to you too. Not right now, she needs some time. But she recognizes that her approach has been inflexible. That was likely the closest thing to an admission of fault I'd get from Bree, and I accepted it for what it was, a small opening, a crack in the wall that had separated us. I'm willing to talk whenever she's ready, I said. I've never wanted conflict, Austin. I just want to be part of your lives. We talked for nearly an hour after that, going over practical details for the summer visit, but also deeper things. His work challenges, my volunteer activities, neutral topics that allowed us to re-establish the easy communication we'd once shared. By the time we hung up, something had healed between us. Not completely, not yet, but enough to breathe easier, to sleep that night without the weight of unresolved grief pressing down on me. The promised video call that weekend was both joyful and awkward. Sola and Carlos appeared on my screen, their faces a mixture of shyness and curiosity. They'd been told I was their grandmother, of course, but 2 years is an eternity in a child's life. For Carlos especially, I existed primarily in stories and photographs, not living memory. "Hi, Grandma," Sola said, waving tentatively at the camera. "Daddy says you live at the beach." "I do," I confirmed, turning my laptop so they could see the ocean through my window. "And I have a special room just for you, with pink walls and a bookshelf full of stories." Her eyes widened. "I remember. And Carlos has the blue room with the bay dolphins painted on the wall." Carlos, hearing his name, pushed his face closer to the camera. "Do you have cookies at your house? Daddy says you make the best cookies." I laughed, delighted by his directness. "I certainly do. Chocolate chip with walnuts, your daddy's favorite when he was your age." Austin appeared briefly in the frame, smiling at our interaction. Bree remained out of sight, but I could sense her presence, monitoring from somewhere nearby. That first call lasted 20 minutes. Not long, but a universe better than the silence of the past 2 years. We established a routine. Every Sunday afternoon, I would video chat with the children. Sometimes Austin would join, sometimes not. Bree never appeared on camera, though occasionally I would hear her voice in the background, reminding the children of the time or gently redirecting their more personal questions. As winter melted into spring, these digital connections gradually strengthened. Sola would show me her science projects. Carlos would proudly display Lego creations. I began reading them bedtime stories once a week, holding beloved picture books up to the camera as I had once done in person. One evening in late April, after the children had said their goodbyes and Austin had taken them to bed, Bree unexpectedly appeared on the screen. "Susan," she said, her posture stiff, formal. "I thought we should talk before the summer visit." "I'd like that," I replied, careful, to keep my tone neutral open. She cleared her throat. "I want to acknowledge that the past 2 years have been difficult. I had concerns about certain aspects of your relationship with the children, and I handled those concerns poorly." Coming from Bree, this careful statement was tantamount to a full apology. I recognized the effort it took for her to make even this much of a concession. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I know we approach some things differently, but I've always respected that you and Austin are the parents. I just want to be a positive presence in the children's lives." She nodded, a quick, efficient movement. "I think we can establish some parameters that work for everyone. The children are excited about staying at the beach house. I've already started preparing their rooms," I told her. "Sola mentioned she's interested in marine biology now, so I found some wonderful books about tide pools and ocean ecosystems." For the first time, Bree's expression softened slightly. She's been obsessed since her science teacher did a unit on ocean conservation. She talks about becoming a marine biologist almost daily. This small piece of information, this glimpse into my granddaughter's developing personality and interests, felt like a gift. "That's wonderful. The beach will be perfect for her then. There's so much to discover. Our conversation wasn't long or particularly warm, but it was respectful, productive. We discussed practical matters, their arrival date, meal preferences, activities the children might enjoy. By the end, we'd established a tentative framework for the visit that acknowledged both my place as grandmother and their authority as parents. As spring progressed toward summer, my hope continued to grow. Each video call brought more ease, more natural interaction with the children. I began to receive occasional texts from Austin with updates or photos, Sola losing a tooth, Carlos scoring his first soccer goal. Small moments, ordinary snippets of their lives, but precious to me after so long without any connection at all. I threw myself into preparing for their visit with renewed energy and purpose. I repainted the children's rooms, updated the decor, based on their current interests, stocked the kitchen with their favorite foods, confirmed through casual questions during our video calls. I even built a child-sized workbench for Carlos in the garage and set up a marine laboratory area on the covered portion of the deck for Sola's explorations. Everything seemed to be falling into place. The rift was healing, bridges were being rebuilt. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like a grandmother again, with all the joy and purpose that role had once brought to my life. If only I had recognized the fragility of this new harmony. Perhaps I would have been better prepared for what came next. The first hint that our reconciliation might not be as solid as I hoped came in mid-June, about 3 weeks before their scheduled arrival. Our regular Sunday video call had been postponed, twice, first because of Sola's swim meet, then due to a work emergency of Austin's. When we finally connected on a Wednesday evening, something felt off. The children were still enthusiastic, chattering about the upcoming beach trip. But Austin seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly during our conversation. And when I asked a simple question about their travel plans, whether they'd arrive in time for dinner on their first day, he glanced off camera before answering. "We're still finalizing the details," he said vaguely. "I'll let you know closer to the date." After the children had been ushered off to bed, I expected Austin to end the call as usual. Instead, Bree appeared, sitting beside him on their living room couch. Her posture was rigid, her smile tight. "Susan," she began, using that carefully controlled tone I'd come to recognize as her managing difficult situations voice. "We wanted to discuss some logistics for the beach house stay." "Of course," I replied, a flutter of unease stirring in my stomach. "What do you need to know?" She glanced at Austin, who shifted uncomfortably before speaking. "Mom, we've been thinking about sleeping arrangements. The master bedroom has that great ocean view and the ensuite bathroom." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "We thought it would make sense for Bree and me to take that room," he continued. "Since we'll be there for 2 weeks and, well, you're used to your cottage. The master bedroom, my bedroom, the space I'd carefully designed, from the custom window seat that caught the morning light, to the shower tiles hand-selected to match the color of sea glass. The room where I'd placed David's photograph on the nightstand, where I kept a journal of ocean observations, where I'd woken every morning for 15 years to the sound of waves. "The cottage is quite small," I said carefully, "and the main house has 5 bedrooms. I assumed I'd stay in my room as usual." Bree leaned forward slightly. "We just thought it would be more convenient for everyone. The children will want to be in the main house, and with the ensuite bathroom—" "I understand," I said, though I didn't, not really. What I understood was that they wanted to claim the prime space in the house, to establish dominance in subtle ways. "We can discuss it when you arrive." A flicker of annoyance crossed Bree's face. "We were hoping to settle these details in advance." "Of course," I said, keeping my tone pleasant. "Let me think about the best arrangement and get back to you." The call ended with a new tension lingering in the air. I sat for a long while afterward, staring out at the darkening ocean, trying to understand what had just happened. Was I overreacting to a simple request? Or was this the first sign that our carefully negotiated reconciliation had deeper issues? I called Edith the next morning, needing her practical perspective. "It's a power play," she said bluntly after I explained the situation. "They're testing boundaries, seeing how much you'll concede." "But why?" "Things have been going so well with the weekly calls, the plans for the visit." "Because," she said gently, "giving you access to the children again means Bree has lost some control. This is her way of regaining it, by claiming your space, your territory." "What should I do?" "I don't want to create conflict right before their visit." "Set a boundary, Susan, politely but firmly. If you give ground on this, they'll keep pushing." I mulled over Edith's advice all day. That evening, I sent Austin a carefully worded email. "I've been thinking about the sleeping arrangements for your visit. While I want everyone to be comfortable, the master bedroom is my personal space with many of my belongings and daily items. I've prepared the blue guest suite for you and Bree. It has the second best ocean view and its own bathroom. Let me know if you need anything specific to make it more comfortable for your stay." His response came the next morning. "Mom, I understand it's your house, but we'll be there for 2 weeks with 2 active kids. It would really be easier for us to have the larger room with the attached bathroom. I'm sure you can move your personal items temporarily." The dismissiveness of his response stung. This wasn't about bathroom access or room size. It was about respect for my space, for the home I'd built. It was about whether I was a valued family member or simply the provider of a free vacation venue. I decided to call rather than continue the email exchange. Austin answered on the 3rd ring, his voice guarded. "Mom, if this is about the bedroom—" "It is," I confirmed. "Austin, I'm happy to have you all stay, but I'm not moving out of my bedroom for 2 weeks. There are 4 other bedrooms in the house, all comfortable, all with access to bathrooms." "Bree really had her heart set on that ocean view," he said, a note of petulance creeping into his voice that reminded me of his teenage years. "The guest suite has an ocean view as well, not quite as panoramic, but still beautiful." He sighed heavily. "Is this really the hill you want to die on, Mom? After everything?" The phrase struck me as odd, as if standing up for myself in my own home was somehow an act of aggression against them. "It's not about dying on hills, Austin. It's about basic consideration. Would you ask any other host to vacate their bedroom? For you?" "You're not just any host," he countered. "You're family." "Exactly. And family respects each other's spaces and boundaries." We went back and forth for several more minutes, neither giving ground. Finally, Austin said he needed to discuss it with Bree and ended the call. 2 days passed with no communication. Our regular Sunday video call with the children came and went with no contact, no explanation. By Monday afternoon, anxiety gnawed at my stomach. Had I jeopardized the reconciliation over a bedroom? Was my boundary setting going to result in another estrangement? I was about to call Austin when a text came through from him. "Sorry for the radio silence. Things have been hectic. After discussing it further, we'll take the guest suite as you suggested." On another note, my parents have expressed interest in joining us for part of the beach trip, probably the 2nd week. Would that be a problem? My parents-in-law, Carter and Edith Miller. A lovely couple, but adding them to the mix would significantly change the dynamic of the visit. More importantly, this was the first I'd heard of their potential inclusion. I stared at the text, a new understanding dawning. The master bedroom request hadn't been about the ocean view or bathroom access. It had been about establishing authority, about positioning themselves as the primary family unit, with me as the secondary consideration. And now, with the addition of Austin's parents, they were further diluting my time with the grandchildren, adding more adults to the equation to ensure I wouldn't have too much influence. The realization sent a chill through me. Despite the apparent reconciliation, despite the weekly calls and plans for the visit, something fundamental hadn't changed. Bree, and by extension, Austin, was still determined to control access to the children, to limit my role in their lives. The question was, what could I do about it? I took a deep breath before responding to Austin's text about his parents joining the beach house visit. I'd be happy to have Carter and Edith visit for a day or two, I wrote, but having 6 additional people in the house for a full week would be quite overwhelming. Perhaps they could stay at the Seabreeze Inn downtown. It's just a 5-minute drive. His response was immediate and defensive. Mom, they're family too. They haven't seen the kids in months. I thought you'd be more understanding. The irony wasn't lost on me. My in-laws, who lived a mere 30 minutes from Austin and Bree, had apparently seen the children more recently than I had, despite my 2-year exile, and now I was being painted as unreasonable for not wanting to host an extended family reunion in my home, a gathering I'd had no part in planning. It's not about understanding, I replied. It's about capacity. The house comfortably sleeps, 6, not 8. And we're still rebuilding our relationship after a long separation. Adding more people changes the dynamic significantly. Austin didn't respond. Instead, Bree called me directly that evening, her voice crisp and businesslike. Susan, I understand you have concerns about Carter and Edith staying at the beach house. It's not that I don't want them to visit, I explained. It's about the timing and the number of people. This is supposed to be a chance for me to reconnect with the children after 2 years. The children love their other grandparents too, she said, a subtle emphasis on other that felt pointed, competitive. They've been looking forward to seeing them. I'm sure they have, I said, struggling to keep my tone even. But this is the first time I'll have seen Sola and Carlos in 2 years. Adding more adults to the mix means less time for us to rebuild our relationship. I think you're being selfish, Bree said bluntly. This vacation isn't just about you. Her words stung, but they also clarified what was happening. This wasn't about accommodations or family visits. It was about control. By filling the house with additional adults, Bree could ensure that my time with the children would always be supervised, diluted, managed. You're right, I said, surprising her with my agreement. It's not just about me. It's about what's best. For the children, having quality time to reconnect with their grandmother after a long absence. Carter and Edith are their grandparents too, she insisted. Yes, and they've had the privilege of being in the children's lives consistently, unlike me. I paused, then added gently, Bree, if we're truly rebuilding our family relationships, we need to be honest with each other. Is there a reason you don't want me to have one-on-one time with Sola and Carlos? The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, I thought she might actually engage with it, might acknowledge the underlying concerns driving her behavior. Instead, she retreated into formality. The children need consistency and stability. Too much change too quickly isn't healthy. For them. It was the same argument she'd used 2 years ago to justify cutting me out completely. Nothing had changed, despite the facade of reconciliation. I understand your concern, I said carefully. But children are resilient, especially when surrounded by people who love them. And I do love them, Bree. That's never changed, even when I wasn't allowed to show it. She was quiet for a moment, then sighed. I'll talk to Austin about his parents staying at the inn for part of their visit. But I want to be clear. We expect to be included in all activities with the children. No solo outings or private conversations about sensitive topics. The restrictions were explicit now, laid bare. I would be permitted access to my grandchildren, but only under strict supervision, only on their terms. Defined as? I asked, needing to understand the full extent of her boundaries, religion, politics, our parenting choices, your opinions about our lifestyle decisions, the usual divisive subjects. I'd never discussed any of these topics with the children, even before the estrangement. They were too young, and I had no interest in contradicting their parents' teachings. But the assumption that I would spoke volumes about how Bree perceived me, as a threat, a negative influence to be contained. "I've never undermined you with the children," I said quietly. "And I never would." "Good," she replied. "Then we understand each other." After the call ended, I sat on my deck watching the waves, wrestling with conflicting emotions. The visit, that had seemed so promising a few weeks ago, now felt fraught with tension, with unspoken power struggles and tacit disapproval. Part of me wanted to rescind the invitation entirely. If they saw my home as merely a convenient vacation venue, if I was to be treated as a potential threat rather than a beloved grandmother, perhaps it would be better to delay until our relationship had truly healed. But the thought of waiting even longer to see Sola and Carlos was unbearable. 2 years had already been stolen. How much more time would I lose if I pushed back now? I called Erica the next morning, seeking her legal and personal perspective. "You have every right to set conditions for the use of your property," she confirmed, after hearing the situation. "But I'm concerned that escalating this conflict right before their visit could backfire." "What would you suggest?" A measured response. "Accept the in-laws' visit, but with clear parameters. Firmly establish certain times that are just for you and the grandchildren. Document everything in writing. Friendly emails that outline the agreements so there can be no misunderstandings later." Her advice made sense. Rather than direct confrontation, which would likely trigger Bree's defenses, I needed to establish reasonable boundaries that centered on the children's well-being. I drafted a careful email to both Austin and Bree. After consideration, I'm happy to welcome Carter and Edith for the second week of your stay. I've reserved a room for them at the Seabreeze Inn, my treat, but they're welcome at the house for meals and activities. I've also planned some special grandmother activities with the children. Tide pool exploration with Sola to support her interest in marine biology, and a building project with Carlos in the workshop area I've created. I've scheduled these for the first week, before Carter and Edith arrive, to give us time to reconnect. I'm looking forward to creating new memories with all of you. The response came from Austin, brief but positive. "Thanks, Mom. This sounds like a good compromise." The kids are really excited about the beach activities. It seemed we had reached a tentative truce, but as the date of their arrival drew closer, more small boundary tests emerged. Bree texted to ask if they could arrive a day earlier than planned. Austin inquired whether his college friend Carter might drop by for a day or two during their stay. There were questions about rearranging furniture to better accommodate the children, requests for special dietary accommodations that would require significant meal planning changes. Each request on its own was minor, reasonable even. But collectively, they formed a pattern, gradually expanding their demands, testing how much I would concede, how far I would go to maintain peace and ensure the visit happened. I navigated each new request carefully, agreeing where I could, setting gentle boundaries where necessary. Yes to arriving early, no to the college friend. Yes to minor furniture adjustments, compromise on the meal planning. Through it all, I maintained focus on what truly mattered. Seeing my grandchildren, again, rebuilding those precious relationships. Everything else was negotiable, or so I thought, until the final request came 3 days before their scheduled arrival, a request that made it clear the power struggle was far from over. The text from Bree arrived on Monday evening, just 3 days before their scheduled Thursday arrival. "Susan, we've been thinking it might be better if you stayed at a hotel for the first few days of our visit. The children are excited but anxious about seeing you after so long. We think a gradual reintroduction would be less overwhelming for them. Perhaps you could join us for dinner on Saturday." I read the message 3 times, disbelief turning to hurt, then to a slow burning anger. After months of careful reconciliation, after all the boundary setting and compromise, after preparing my home and my heart for this reunion, Bree was now suggesting I vacate my own house and wait for an invitation to see my grandchildren. It wasn't just unreasonable. It was cruel. Instead of responding immediately, I took a long walk on the beach, letting the rhythm of the waves soothe my churning emotions. The sun was setting by the time I returned, casting long shadows across the deck David and I had rebuilt together after a hurricane nearly 20 years ago. This house wasn't just property. It was the physical manifestation of decades of dreams, work, and love. It contained memories in every corner. Austin learning to swim in the ocean, David grilling fresh-caught fish on summer evenings, quiet mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles. My life was woven into the very fabric of this place, and now I was being asked to abandon it, to surrender it completely so that Bree could create her perfect controlled environment, free from my influence. I called Edith first, needing her steady friendship before I responded. "They what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's beyond inappropriate, Susan. It's downright disrespectful." "I know," I sighed. "But what do I do? If I refuse, they might cancel the visit entirely." "Then they cancel," Edith said firmly. "You've compromised at every turn. You've agreed to their parents visiting, to supervise time with the children, to every reasonable request they've made. But leaving your own home? That's not compromise. That's capitulation." She was right. Of course, there were limits to what I should accept, even for the chance to see my grandchildren. Next, I called Erica for a more strategic perspective. "This request crosses a line," she confirmed, "and it suggests they're not approaching this reconciliation in good faith. If you agree to this, what's next? Will you only be permitted to see the children on their terms forever?" "What should I say?" I asked. "Be direct but non-confrontational. Make it clear that staying elsewhere isn't an option, but offer alternatives that address their stated concern about overwhelming the children." After these conversations, I felt more centered, more certain of my position. I called Austin directly, rather than responding to Bree's text. This warranted a conversation, not a digital exchange that could be misinterpreted. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice guarded. "Mom, I guess you got Bree's message." "I did," I said calmly. "And I have to say, I'm surprised and disappointed. We've spent months rebuilding our relationship, planning this visit, and now, 3 days before you arrive, I'm being asked to leave my own home." "It's not forever," he said quickly, "just for a few days while the kids adjust. Austin, the children have been video chatting with me weekly for months. They're not meeting a stranger. And this is my home, the home I built, that I maintain, that I've prepared specifically for your visit." "I know, Mom, but Bree thinks—" "What Bree thinks," I interrupted gently, "and what is reasonable are two different things in this case. I understand the concern about overwhelming the children, but there are other solutions. We could plan structured activities for the first day or two. I could give you all space to settle in before joining for specific events. But leaving my home is not an option I'm willing to consider." There was a long silence. I could almost hear him weighing his options, caught between his wife's demands and his mother's boundaries. "She won't like this," he finally said. "I'm not trying to create conflict, Austin. I want this visit to be wonderful for everyone, especially the children, but I need to be treated with basic respect, and asking me to vacate my own home doesn't meet that standard." Another pause, then a sigh. "Let me talk to her." "Thank you. And Austin? I love you and the children very much. I've missed you all terribly. All I want is to be part of your lives again in a healthy way." "I know, Mom," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I'll call you back." The next few hours were tense as I waited for his call. Would they cancel the visit entirely? Had I finally pushed back too hard, too late in the process? I busied myself with last-minute preparations, changing sheets on the guest beds, stocking the refrigerator with child-friendly snacks, arranging seashells in decorative bowls. My phone rang just after 9 o'clock. "Austin again." "Mom," he began. sounding tired. We've been talking and we understand your position about staying in your own home. Relief washed over me. I appreciate that. Bree still has concerns about the transition being too abrupt for the children after so long. Could we compromise? Maybe you could give us the first evening to settle in and then join us the next morning for breakfast? It wasn't a perfect solution. It still involved me making myself scarce in my own home for their arrival. But it was reasonable, a genuine attempt at meeting in the middle. I can do that, I agreed. I'll make plans to be out for dinner that first night and you can text me when you're ready for me to return. Thanks, Mom. That helps a lot. After we hung up, I felt a cautious optimism returning. We had navigated a difficult moment without disaster. Perhaps this was progress. Austin standing up to Bree, at least partially. Bree accepting that there were limits to what she could demand. The next day, I channeled my nervous energy into final preparations. I filled a basket for each child with small welcome gifts, a magnifying glass and tide pool identification guide for Sola, a set of specialized building blocks for Carlos. I prepared a welcome packet for the adults with information about local attractions, restaurant recommendations, and the summer events calendar. In the evening, I received an unexpected text from Bree. Thank you for the compromise about our arrival. The children are very excited about seeing you in the beach house. The message wasn't warm exactly, but it was civil, cooperative even. I chose to see it as a positive sign, an indication that perhaps she was making her own efforts toward reconciliation. As Thursday approached, I finalized my plans for their arrival evening. I'd have dinner with Edith at her house, giving the family space to settle in without me hovering. I arranged the guest rooms with fresh flowers and personalized welcome notes. I stocked the kitchen with ingredients for pancake breakfast, the C. Next morning, our first meal together in over 2 years. Everything was ready. Now, I just had to wait and hope that the careful bridges we'd built would hold under the weight of real, in-person interaction. The day of their arrival dawned bright and clear, a perfect summer morning on the coast. I spent it in a flurry of last-minute preparations, cutting fresh flowers for the dining table, setting out beach towels on the deck, making sure the children's welcome baskets were perfectly arranged. By 4 o'clock, everything was ready. I took one final look around my home, then grabbed my purse and headed out as planned, giving the family space to arrive and settle in without me. Dinner with Edith was a welcome distraction. We sat on her patio overlooking the garden, drinking iced tea and discussing everything but my family situation. It was exactly what I needed, a few hours of normalcy before the emotional reunion to come. Text me tomorrow and let me know how it goes, Edith said as I was leaving. And remember, you have every right to be treated with respect in your own home. I returned to my street around 9, as Austin and I had agreed. The lights were on, in the beach house, and their SUV was parked in the driveway alongside another car I didn't recognize. A sleek black sedan with rental car plates. Strange. They weren't supposed to have other guests during this first part of the visit. Had plans? Changed without my knowledge? I parked on the street rather than pulling into my usual spot, not wanting to block anyone in. As I approached the house, I could hear laughter drifting from the open windows, children's voices, Austin's deeper tones, and another man's voice I didn't recognize. Rather than walking straight in, I texted Austin as promised. I'm back. Is it a good time to come in? His response was immediate. Give us 15 more minutes. After 2 years of separation, after a day of being absent from my own home for their comfort, I was being asked to wait outside a little longer. I sat on the bench at the end of my front path, watching the waves in the moonlight, tamping down my frustration. 15 minutes wasn't much in the grand scheme of things. I could be patient a bit longer. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No text from Austin, no invitation to enter my own home. I was about to text again when the front door opened. Austin stepped out, looking slightly flustered. Mom, sorry for the Delay. We got caught up in conversation. Come in. I followed him inside, where a scene I hadn't expected greeted me. My living room had been rearranged, furniture moved to create a more open space in the center. Sola and Carlos were in pajamas, playing a board game on the coffee table with a man I'd never seen before. Tall, distinguished, probably in his early 40s. Bree was in the kitchen, arranging something on a serving tray. She looked up as I entered, her expression a careful mask of politeness. "Susan, you're back. Would you like some wine? We opened that bottle from the rack in your kitchen. I hope that's okay." Before I could answer, the stranger rose from the couch and approached. Hand extended? "You must be Susan. I've heard so much about you. I'm David Harrington." I shook his hand automatically, confusion mounting. "Nice to meet you. I'm sorry, are you a friend of Austin and Bree's?" An awkward silence fell. Austin cleared his throat. "David is Bree's therapist. He's been helping us work through some family dynamics issues. Her therapist. Here, in my home, playing board games with my grandchildren, drinking my wine. And no one had thought to mention this to me." "I see," I said, struggling to keep my tone neutral. "I wasn't aware we'd have another guest tonight." David smiled smoothly. "I'm not staying, just stopping by briefly. Bree thought it might be helpful to have some support during this transition period. Did she?" I looked toward Bree, who was studiously arranging cheese on a plate, avoiding my gaze. The children had paused their game, watching this adult interaction with curious eyes. Sola, always perceptive, seemed to sense the tension. "Grandma," she called, breaking the awkward moment. "We're playing Oceanopoly. David made it special for us." I moved toward them, kneeling beside the coffee table to examine the game, a custom-created version of Monopoly with ocean themes. Properties named after sea creatures, little plastic seashells instead of houses. "It's wonderful," I said sincerely. "And so are you two. May I have a hug, or is that too much for tonight?" Carlos launched himself into my arms without hesitation, his small body solid and warm against mine. Sola followed more carefully, but her embrace was genuine. "We missed you, Grandma," Carlos whispered against my ear. "I missed you too, sweetheart. More than you can possibly know." Over the children's heads, I caught David observing us with professional interest, making mental notes. The realization that our reunion was being monitored and evaluated by a stranger sent a chill through me. After the children returned to their game, I moved to the kitchen under the pretense of helping Bree with the snacks. "A therapist, Bree?" I kept my voice low. "You brought your therapist to my home without mentioning it?" She continued arranging crackers, not meeting my eyes. "David has been instrumental in helping us navigate this reconciliation. He wanted to observe the initial interactions to help guide us through any difficulties." "And you didn't think I deserved to know about this in advance?" "We thought you might object," she admitted. "And his presence is important for the children's emotional well-being during this transition." The implication was clear. My potential objection would have been unreasonable, harmful even. Once again, I was being cast as the problem, the threat that needed managing. "We thought you might object," she admitted. "And his presence is important for the children's emotional well-being during this transition." The implication was clear. My potential objection would have been unreasonable, harmful even. Once again, I was being cast as the problem, the threat that needed managing. I took a steadying breath. "Bree, I understand wanting support, but bringing a stranger into my home to evaluate my interactions with my grandchildren without my knowledge or consent crosses a line." She finally looked at me, her expression cool. "It's not an evaluation. It's therapeutic support." "For whom, exactly?" "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you've set up a supervised visitation with my own grandchildren in my own home." A flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed her face, quickly replaced by defensive irritation. You're overreacting. David is here to help everyone, including you. I didn't ask for his help. I wasn't consulted about his presence. How is that helping me? Before she could respond, Austin joined us in the kitchen, his expression concerned. Everything okay here? Just getting to know the situation, I said evenly. I wasn't aware David would be joining us tonight. Austin had the grace to look uncomfortable. It was a last-minute decision. The kids have been working with him for a few months, and they're comfortable with him. We thought it might ease the transition. Another revelation. The children had been in therapy, presumably to prepare them for reconnecting with their estranged grandmother. As if I were some traumatic presence they needed professional help to face. I see, I said, the pieces falling into place. And how long will David be joining us during your stay? Just tonight, Austin assured me quickly, maybe once more later in the visit to check in. I nodded, processing this information. I think I'd like to be informed in advance next time. Of course, he agreed readily. We should have mentioned it. I'm sorry. The apology sounded genuine, but the damage was done. What should have been a joyful, organic reunion had been transformed into a clinical exercise, managed and monitored by professionals I hadn't invited and didn't know. As I carried the cheese plate to the living room, a disturbing thought struck me. What else hadn't they told me about this visit? What other surprises were waiting to be revealed? David Harrington finally left around 10 o'clock, after the children had been tucked into bed. I'd spent the evening playing the gracious host, making small talk while internally processing the implications of his presence. Once he was gone, the three of us, Austin, Bree, and I, settled in the living room with an uncomfortable silence, hanging between us. The children seem well, I offered, searching for neutral ground. They are, Bree agreed. The therapy has been very helpful for them. I couldn't let that pass. Therapy to deal with what exactly? Austin shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Mom, it's not what you're thinking. How do you know what I'm thinking? We've barely spoken in 2 years. Bree set her wine glass down with deliberate precision. The children needed help processing your absence from their lives. They had questions we couldn't always answer. Questions that might have been avoided if you hadn't cut me out completely, I pointed out. Children are resilient. They understand. Concepts like, Grandma lives far away, or, we'll visit Grandma soon. What they don't understand is why someone they love suddenly vanishes from their lives. We did what we thought was best at the time, Austin said defensively. For whom? I asked quietly. For the children or for yourselves? Bree's posture stiffened. We're their parents. We make decisions based on their well-being. I've never questioned your authority as parents, I said. But I do question whether removing a loving grandmother from their lives without explanation was truly in their best interest. You weren't respecting our boundaries, Bree countered. Your approach to the children was undermining our parenting philosophy. What specific things did I do that were so harmful? I asked, repeating the question. I'd been asking for 2 years without receiving a clear answer. Austin sighed heavily. Mom, let's not rehash the past. We're here now, trying to move forward. Are we? I looked between them. Because bringing a therapist to evaluate my interactions with the children doesn't feel like moving forward. It feels like you still see me as a problem to be managed. That's not why David was here, Bree insisted, though her averted gaze suggested otherwise. Then why was he here? Why wasn't I informed in advance? Why did he need to observe our reunion? Neither answered immediately. Austin looked at Bree, clearly waiting for her to take the lead. Her influence over him had always troubled me, but never more than in this moment. The transition needs to be handled carefully, Bree finally said. David has been helping us create a structured reintegration plan. The clinical terminology made my heart ache. Reintegration plan? They're my grandchildren, not social work. Cases. I'm their grandmother, not a potentially dangerous element needing careful monitoring. No one said you were dangerous, Austin interjected. Then why the secrecy? Why the supervision? Why treat this reunion like it's something that needs professional oversight? Bree leaned forward, her expression carefully controlled. Susan, I know you care about the children, but caring isn't the same as understanding modern child development. Your generation approached child rearing very differently. There it was again. The dismissal of my worth based solely on my age, the implication that my experience and knowledge were outdated, irrelevant. You forget that I spent 42 years as a pediatric nurse, I reminded her. I've worked with hundreds of families, witnessed parenting trends come and go. The fundamentals of what children need haven't changed. Love, security, consistency, and yes, boundaries. But boundaries aren't walls, Bree. They don't exist to isolate children from loving relationships. That's your opinion, she said dismissively. It's more than opinion. It's supported by decades of research on child development and family dynamics. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. But this isn't about parenting philosophies. It's about respect. You're in my home, using my property, drinking my wine, while treating me like I need to be screened and cleared before I can interact normally with my grandchildren. Austin looked genuinely surprised. Mom, that's not— It is, I interrupted, gently. Let's be honest with each other. You brought a therapist to observe me without my knowledge or consent. You've established rules about what topics I can discuss with the children. You asked me to leave my own home to ease your arrival. These aren't the actions of people who trust and respect me. Silence fell again, heavier this time. Bree stared out the window, her profile sharp in the lamplight. Austin looked down at his hands, seemingly at a loss for words. I continued, my voice softer but no less determined. I want this visit to work. I want to rebuild my relationship with Sola and Carlos. But that can't happen if we're not honest about the underlying issues. What do you want from us? Bree asked, her tone suggesting I was making unreasonable demands. I want to be treated as a valued family member, not a potential threat. I want the chance to love my grandchildren openly, without constant supervision or restriction, and I want acknowledgement that cutting me out of their lives for 2 years was harmful, to them and to me. Austin looked up, his expression pained. Mom, we never meant to hurt you. Intent doesn't negate impact, I said gently. And the impact has been profound. Bree stood abruptly. I think we should continue this conversation tomorrow. It's been a long day, and emotions are running high. Classic deflection, postponing difficult conversations in hopes they'll be forgotten or lose urgency. But I'd waited 2 years for this moment, and I wasn't willing to let it pass without resolution. Before we end this discussion, I said, remaining seated, I need to know one thing. Are you genuinely interested in rebuilding our family relationships? Or is this visit simply about using my beach house for a convenient vacation? The bluntness of the question seemed to catch them both off guard. Austin looked stricken. Bree's expression hardened momentarily before she composed herself. That's a very hurtful suggestion, she said carefully. It wasn't meant to hurt. It was meant to clarify. Because your actions and your words haven't aligned, and I need to understand where we truly stand. Austin stepped in, his voice conciliatory. Mom, of course we want to rebuild our relationship. That's why we're here. But it's complicated, and we're all learning how to navigate this situation. I nodded, acknowledging his effort. Then let's agree to navigate it with honesty and respect moving forward. No more surprise therapists. No more treating me like an outsider in my own home. Can we do that? Austin nodded readily. Of course. Bree hesitated, then gave a tight nod. We can try. It wasn't the wholehearted agreement I might have hoped for, but it was a start. And as they headed upstairs to bed, leaving me alone in my living room with the sound of waves through the open windows, I felt a cautious sense of progress, the fear. Confrontation hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. I'd spoken my truth clearly, without anger, but with firm conviction. Whether they were truly ready to hear it remained to be seen, but I'd taken the first crucial step toward authentic reconciliation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, I'd reclaimed my voice. I woke early the next morning, as I had every day for decades, with the first light filtering through my curtains. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people in my house. The distant flush of a toilet, the soft padding of small feet in the hallway, a child's whispered question. My grandchildren were here, under my roof. Despite all the tension with Bree and Austin, despite the surprise therapist and veiled accusations, that simple fact filled me with quiet joy. I dressed quickly in casual clothes, linen pants and a light blue top, and headed to the kitchen to start breakfast. The promised pancakes would be a perfect way to begin our first full day together. As I was mixing the batter, Carlos appeared in the doorway, still in pajamas decorated with construction vehicles, his hair tousled from sleep. "Grandma," he said, tentatively. "Are you making pancakes?" "I sure am," I smiled, gesturing him closer. "Blueberry pancakes just like you used to love. Would you like to help?" He nodded eagerly, and soon he was perched on a stool beside me, carefully dropping blueberries onto pancakes sizzling in the pan. We worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "Why didn't you visit us for so long? Didn't you want to see me and Sola?" The innocent question pierced my heart. I set down my spatula and turned to face him fully. "Carlos, I wanted to see you more than anything in the world. Every single day I missed you and your sister terribly." His brow furrowed in confusion. "Then why didn't you come? Mommy said you were busy." Before I could respond, Bree appeared in the doorway, her expression tightening when she saw us together, clearly hearing the end of our conversation. "Carlos, why don't you go wake Daddy and Sola for breakfast? Tell them Grandma made pancakes." He hesitated, looking between us, sensing the tension even at his young age. Then he slid off the stool and padded out of the kitchen. "We agreed the children wouldn't be questioned about the past," Bree said the moment he was out of earshot. "I didn't question him," I replied, flipping a pancake with deliberate care. "He asked me a direct question, and I answered honestly. I won't lie to my grandchildren, Bree. There's a difference between lying and age-appropriate explanations. Is telling him I was busy for 2 years an age-appropriate explanation? Or is it a convenient fiction that protects the adults at the expense of the child's understanding?" She crossed her arms, defensive. "He's 5 years old. He doesn't need to know about complex family dynamics. He doesn't need all the details, no. But he does need to know that his grandmother loves him and always wanted to see him. That absence doesn't mean abandonment." Before Bree could respond, the rest of the family arrived, Austin leading a sleepy-looking Sola by the hand. The conversation was shelved as we settled into breakfast, but the underlying tension remained, hovering between Bree and me like a storm cloud. After breakfast, we planned our first full day. The weather was perfect for beach activities, warm, but not too hot, with a gentle breeze. I suggested we start with tide pool exploration, knowing Sola would enjoy discovering the miniature ecosystems teeming with life. "I brought special waterproof shoes for tide pools," I told her, pulling out the child-sized water shoes I'd purchased weeks earlier. "And a field guide so we can identify everything we find." Her eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "Can we collect specimens for my science project?" "Absolutely. I've set up a little marine laboratory on the covered part of the deck. We can examine everything there before returning it to the ocean." For the first time since their arrival, I saw Bree relax slightly. Perhaps she was recognizing that my interest in Sola's scientific curiosity was genuine, not some ploy to undermine parental authority. The morning unfolded better than I could have hoped. We spent hours exploring the tide pools, with both children fully engaged and excited about each new discovery. Sola meticulously documented findings in a notebook I'd given her, while Carlos collected interesting shells and small stones, creating elaborate stories about each one. Austin joined in enthusiastically, reminiscing about similar explorations during his own childhood. Even Bree seemed to enjoy herself, though she maintained a certain watchfulness, never straying far from the children. By lunchtime, we'd established a tentative harmony. Not perfect, but functional. A family finding its way back to connection, through shared activities and common interests. After a simple lunch on the deck, Austin suggested the children rest for a bit before afternoon beach time. While they settled in their rooms with books, I found myself alone on the deck with Bree. An unexpected opportunity for private conversation. Sola really loves marine biology, I commented, keeping my tone light, non-confrontational. She does, Bree agreed. Her science teacher says she has unusual focus for her age. She reminds me of Austin at that age, always observing, cataloging, wanting to understand how things work. Bree nodded, then surprised me by asking, "Was Austin always so meticulous?" Sola can spend hours organizing her collections, making sure everything is just so. He was, I confirmed, smiling at the memory. His room was always perfectly arranged, books alphabetized, toys sorted by type and color. David used to joke that he was the only 7-year-old with a filing system. A flicker of genuine interest crossed Bree's face. I didn't know that about him. He's still that way with his work files. I always assumed it came from his legal training. This small human moment, a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law sharing observations about a beloved child, felt significant. Not a breakthrough exactly, but a hairline crack in the wall of formality and suspicion Bree had maintained. "I have photo albums," I offered, "from when Austin was a child. Would you like to see them sometime? There might be bits of Sola and Carlos you recognize in him." She hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe. The children might enjoy that too." We lapsed into silence again, but it felt less strained than before. As we sat watching the waves, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue as we were, maintaining careful distance, navigating around difficult topics, accepting the limited connection Bree was willing to permit. Or I could take a risk, push for deeper understanding, potentially disrupting the fragile peace we'd established. The easy path would be to continue with beach activities, family meals, superficial conversations, a pleasant vacation that might lead to occasional future visits, but never address the underlying issues that had caused the estrangement in the first place. The harder path would require courage, vulnerability, and the possibility of renewed conflict. But it also offered the only real hope for genuine reconciliation. As I watched a pair of pelicans dive into the waves, perfectly synchronized in their hunt, I knew what I had to do. Surface harmony wasn't enough. If we were to truly heal as a family, we needed to address the deeper currents that had pulled us apart. The decision crystallized in my mind. Tonight, after the children were asleep, I would have a real conversation with Bree and Austin. One that went beyond surface grievances, to the heart of our family dysfunction. One that offered a path forward based on truth, not convenience. It was a risk, but one worth taking. Because my grandchildren deserved more than supervised visits and careful scripts. They deserved a family bound by genuine love and honest communication. And I was willing to fight for that, even if it meant disrupting the careful peace we'd established. The battle for my place in my grandchildren's lives wasn't over. It was just beginning. The remainder of the day passed pleasantly enough. We built sandcastles on the beach, swam in the gentle waves, collected more shells for Carlos's growing collection. To an outside observer, we might have looked like any normal family enjoying a summer vacation, laughing, playing, sharing meals together. But beneath the surface activities, I was mentally preparing for the conversation to come. I'd called Erica, during a brief moment alone, seeking her advice on how to approach such a delicate discussion. Focus on the future, not the past, she'd counseled. Make it about building a healthy relationship moving forward, not assigning blame for what's already happened. Her advice made sense, though I knew that some acknowledgement of past harm would be necessary for genuine healing. After dinner, as Austin read bedtime stories to the children, I prepared coffee and set out cookies on the deck. The evening was mild, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. It was a perfect setting for an important family conversation. Bree emerged from the children's room first, looking surprised to find me waiting with the coffee service. "I thought we might talk," I said simply. "All three of us, once Austin finishes." "With bedtime." She hesitated, then nodded, taking a seat across from me. "What about?" "The future. Our family. How we move forward from here." Austin joined us a few minutes later, smiling as he spotted the cookies. "Mom's famous chocolate chip. The kids are already asking when you'll make them some." "Tomorrow," I promised. "We can bake together." We chatted about the day's activities for a few minutes, sipping coffee and enjoying the evening breeze. Then, gathering my courage, I gently steered the conversation toward deeper waters. "I've been thinking a lot about family," I began. "About what makes relationships work, what makes them fail, and how to repair them when they've been damaged." Austin looked up sharply, sensing the shift in topic. Bree's posture stiffened slightly. "These past 2 years have been painful for all of us," I continued, "but I believe they've also taught us something important, that we can't take family connections for granted. They require nurturing, communication, and sometimes difficult conversations like this one." "Mom," Austin started, but I raised a hand gently. "Please let me finish. I've had a lot of time to think about this." I took a deep breath. "I don't want to dwell on past hurts or assign blame. What's done is done. But I do want to understand why it happened, so we can prevent it from happening again." Bree set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "What exactly are you asking?" "I'm asking for honesty. What was it, really, that led to cutting me out of the children's lives? Because outdated parenting philosophies has never felt like the whole truth." There was a long silence. Austin looked at Bree, who seemed to be wrestling with some internal debate. Finally, she spoke. "It wasn't just your approach with the children," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "It was how you made me feel as a mother." This was new territory. I leaned forward slightly, giving her my full attention. "Every time you were with the children, they lit up. You knew exactly what stories they loved, what games to play, how to calm them when they were upset. You had this effortless connection with them. And her voice caught slightly. "I struggled. Motherhood didn't come naturally to me the way it seemed to for you." "Bree," I said gently, "being a grandmother is different from being a mother. I've had decades of practice, and I only see the children in small doses during the fun times. Parenting day in and day out is much harder." "I know that intellectually," she acknowledged. "But emotionally, every time you stepped in and did something with ease that I found challenging, it triggered all my insecurities, all my fears that I wasn't a good enough mother." Austin reached over to take her hand. "You're an amazing mother." "Try to be," she said. "But I've always felt inadequate. My own mother was highly critical. Nothing was ever good enough. I swore I'd be different with my children, but I've been terrified of failing them." The pieces were finally falling into place. This wasn't about outdated phrases or giving sweets before dinner. It was about a young mother's insecurity, triggered by what she perceived as effortless competence on my part. "Bree," I said carefully, "I never meant to make you feel inadequate. I was just being a grandmother, loving my grandchildren the best way I knew how." "I know," she admitted, Logically, I know that, but it felt like a constant reminder of my own struggles. And then when the children would talk about you constantly after visits, ask when they could see you again, I felt like I was competing for their affection and losing. It was never a competition, I assured her. Children have unlimited capacity for love. Their attachment to me didn't diminish their love for you. Austin spoke up, his voice thoughtful. I should have recognized what was happening. I saw Bree struggling, saw how stressed she became around visits, but I didn't understand the underlying issue. It seemed easier to just create some distance. Distance became absence, I said quietly, and absence became estrangement. Bree nodded, looking genuinely regretful for perhaps the first time. It wasn't a conscious decision at first. We just started spacing visits further apart. Then after that argument about the scraped knee, it seemed like a natural breaking point. But 2 years, Bree. 2 years without even allowing phone calls or video chats. I know, she said softly. It went too far. By the time I realized how extreme it had become, it felt too late to go back. The children had stopped asking about you as often. Our life had a new rhythm without the complicated family dynamics. It was easier. The brutal honesty of her admission was almost refreshing after years of vague justifications. Easier for whom? I asked, not unkindly. Not for the children, who lost a loving grandparent. Not for me, certainly. For me, she admitted. It was easier for me, and I convinced myself that meant it was better for everyone. Austin looked pained. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have stood up sooner, pushed harder for reconciliation. I reached across the table to touch his hand. We all made mistakes. What matters now is how we move forward. For the first time since their arrival, I felt like we were having a real conversation, honest and unguarded. Bree had finally revealed her true feelings, and in doing so had opened a door to genuine understanding. So where do we go from here? Austin asked, looking between us. I took a moment to consider my response carefully. This was the crucial moment, the opportunity to establish a new foundation for our family relationships. I needed to get it right. I think we need a new agreement, I said finally, looking between Austin and Bree. One based on honesty and mutual respect, not fear and control. What kind of agreement? Bree asked, her tone cautious but not dismissive. First, I need acknowledgement that cutting me out of the children's lives was wrong. Not just a miscommunication or a difference in parenting philosophies, but genuinely harmful to everyone involved. Austin nodded immediately. It was wrong, Mom. We should have found a better way to handle the situation. Bree took longer to respond, but eventually gave a small nod. It went too far, she admitted. The children missed you, even when we tried to distract them from it. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of harm, but it was a step in the right direction. I continued. Second, I need a commitment to regular, consistent contact with the grandchildren going forward. Visits, phone calls, video chats, all without constant supervision or restrictions. I'm not comfortable with completely unsupervised visits yet, Bree said quickly. That feels like too big a step. I'm not asking to take the children alone for weeks at a time, I clarified. But I am asking to be trusted as their grandmother. To be able to read them a bedtime story or take them for ice cream without someone monitoring every word I say. Austin looked thoughtful. That seems reasonable. Maybe we could start with short activities. An hour at the beach, a walk to get ice cream, and build from there? I nodded, appreciating his attempt at compromise. That would be a good beginning. And what about when we're back home? Bree asked. We live 3 hours away. Weekly video calls, as we've been doing. Monthly visits when possible, either me coming to you or you bringing the children here, and regular updates about their lives, school projects, activities, the everyday things I've missed. They exchanged glances, communicating silently in that way long-married couples often do. "We can commit to that," Austin said finally. "Weekly calls, monthly visits when schedules allow. And Mom, I promise I'll be better about sending updates and photos." "There's one more thing," I said, knowing this might be the most difficult part. "I need us to address the underlying issue Bree raised, her feeling of competition or inadequacy when I'm with the children." Bree tensed visibly. "I don't think—" "Please," I said gently. "This is important. If we don't address it, these feelings will resurface, and we might end up back where we started." She sighed, then nodded reluctantly. "What do you suggest?" "First, I want you to know that I see what an incredible mother you are. The children are kind, curious, well-adjusted. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of consistent, loving parenting." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, as if she hadn't expected praise from me. "Second," I continued, "I think we need to reframe our thinking. My relationship with the children doesn't diminish yours. It enriches their lives. Different adults bring different strengths, different perspectives, different kinds of love. That's a gift to them, not a competition." "That makes sense intellectually," Bree acknowledged. "But emotionally—" "Emotions aren't always rational," I agreed. "Which is why I'm suggesting we communicate openly when these feelings arise. If something I do triggers your insecurity, tell me directly instead of pulling away or creating distance." Austin looked relieved at this practical approach. "That sounds healthy, for all of us. And I'll be more mindful of not overstepping," I added. "I know I'm not their parent. I don't get to make major decisions about their upbringing. But I do get to be their grandmother. To love them, teach them what I know, create special memories with them." Bree was quiet for a long moment, seemingly wrestling with herself. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "My mother was never interested in being a grandmother. She criticizes the children, compares them unfavorably to other kids, makes snide comments about our parenting. The few times we visit her, everyone's miserable." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "Sometimes I think I resented how good you were with them because it highlighted what they're missing from my side of the family." The admission clearly cost her, but it felt like a breakthrough, perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever shared with me. "I'm sorry they don't have that relationship with your mother," I said sincerely. "Every child deserves to be cherished by their grandparents." "They have that with you," she acknowledged. "Even after 2 years apart, they connected with you immediately. It's remarkable." "Children have amazing capacity for love," I said, "and for forgiveness." Austin, who had been listening intently to our exchange, spoke up. "I think we have a path forward. Clear expectations, regular contact, open communication when issues arise. Is that something we can all commit to?" I nodded. "Absolutely." Bree hesitated, then nodded as well. "I'm willing to try, for the children's sake." "And for ours," I added gently. "We're a family, an imperfect, complicated family, but a family. Nonetheless, the children deserve to see us working together, modeling how healthy adult relationships can overcome challenges." As we continued talking into the evening, the tension that had hovered between us since their arrival gradually eased. We weren't magically transformed into a perfectly harmonious family. There were still moments of defensiveness from Bree, of discomfort when certain topics arose. But there was also laughter, genuine connection, and most importantly, honesty. When Austin brought out the photo albums I'd mentioned to Bree earlier, we spent an hour looking through pictures of his childhood. I shared stories that made him groan with embarrassment, and Bree smile with newfound understanding of her husband. "He was always so serious about his collections," I told her, pointing to a picture of 7-year-old Austin meticulously arranging rocks by type. One summer, he decided to catalog every single tree in our neighborhood, spent weeks with a field guide, creating this elaborate classification system. That explains so much about how he organizes his work files, Bree said, smiling. Genuinely. He color codes everything. Still, I laughed, some things never change. As the evening wound down, we had covered significant ground, not just in establishing new boundaries and expectations, but in genuinely connecting as adults with shared interest in the children's well-being. Nothing had been magically fixed. The hurt of 2 years' estrangement couldn't be erased in a single conversation. Bree's insecurities as a mother wouldn't vanish overnight. Austin's tendency to avoid conflict rather than address problems directly would require ongoing attention. But we had created something essential, a foundation of honesty upon which we could build a healthier family dynamic. We had named the real issues, not just the surface symptoms. We had committed to a path forward that honored everyone's needs while prioritizing the children's well-being. As Austin and Bree headed upstairs to bed, Bree paused at the bottom of the stairs. "Susan," she said, her voice tentative but sincere. "Thank you for not giving up on us, for fighting for your place in the children's lives. They need you more than I was willing to admit." It wasn't a complete transformation. There would still be challenges ahead, moments of tension, old patterns reasserting themselves. But in that simple acknowledgement, I heard something I hadn't expected from Bree: respect. And that perhaps more than anything else, gave me hope for our future as a family. The days that followed our heart-to-heart conversation took on a different quality. Lighter, more genuine, though not without occasional moments of tension. Old habits don't disappear overnight, after all. But there was a new willingness to work through uncomfortable moments rather than retreat into defensive positions. The first real test came the following morning when I offered to take Sola beachcombing while Bree and Austin took Carlos into town for supplies. "Just the two of us," I suggested casually over breakfast. She mentioned wanting to collect more specimens for her marine laboratory. I saw the flicker of hesitation cross Bree's face, the old instinct to supervise, to control. But then, visibly, she made a choice. She took a deep breath and nodded. "That sounds nice. Sola would enjoy that." Then, turning to her daughter, she asked, "Would you like to go exploring with Grandma this morning?" Sola's face lit up. "Yes. Can we look for sea glass? My friend Mia has a collection, and I want to start one too." "Of course," I replied, careful to maintain a casual tone despite the significance of the moment. "I know exactly where to look for the best pieces." As they prepared to leave for town, I watched Bree crouch down to Sola's level, expecting a list of cautions and restrictions. Instead, she simply said, "Have fun with Grandma. We'll be back in a couple of hours." It was a small moment, but meaningful, the first time since their arrival that I'd been entrusted with one of the children without supervision. Once they were gone, Sola and I set out along the shoreline, collecting buckets and mesh bags for our treasures. Free from watchful eyes, our conversation flowed naturally. She told me about her school, her friends, her dream of becoming a marine biologist, like the lady on the nature show who swims with whales. "Your grandfather swam with dolphins once," I told her as we examined a piece of blue sea glass. "We were on vacation in Florida, and he joined a special program at a marine research center." "Really?" Her eyes widened. "I don't remember, Grandpa." "David. You were very little when he passed away," I explained gently. "Just a baby. But he held you and loved you very much." She considered this information solemnly. "Do you think he would have liked my sea glass collection?" "He would have loved it," I assured her. "He was a science teacher, you know. He loved helping young people discover the natural world." As we continued our walk, collecting treasures and talking, I felt the precious weight of this moment. Grandmother and granddaughter reconnecting, sharing memories and creating new ones. This was what had been stolen from us for 2 years. This was what I had fought to reclaim. When Austin, Bree, and Carlos returned, Sola ran to show them our discoveries, chattering excitedly about the perfect heart-shaped piece of green sea glass we'd found. "Did you have a good time?" Austin asked, me quietly as Bree helped Sola arrange her findings. "Wonderful," I said simply. "Thank you for trusting me with her." He looked slightly ashamed. "It shouldn't have to be a matter of trust. You're her grandmother." "We're building something new," I reminded him. "Each step forward matters." That afternoon, as if the universe was determined to test our newfound understanding, Carlos fell while running on the deck and skinned his knee. A near-identical situation to the one that had triggered our original conflict 2 years earlier. Was closest to him when it happened, and reached him first as he began to cry. Instinctively, I knelt beside him, examining the injury. Minor, just a scrape. I reached for the first aid kit kept in the deck cabinet. "It's okay, sweetheart," I soothed, cleaning the wound gently. "Just a little scrape. We'll have you fixed. Up in no time." I was acutely aware of Bree watching from a few feet away, her body tense. This was the moment that had started our estrangement. Me tending to an injured child, using comfort techniques Bree had labeled outdated. I applied the bandage carefully. Then, remembering the specific point of contention, I stopped myself from automatically kissing it better. Instead, I asked, "All done. How does that feel?" Carlos sniffled, looking down at his knee. "Better." "But—" He looked at me expectantly, then at his mother. Bree stepped forward, and for a moment I thought she was going to take over, to assert her authority. Instead, she said quietly, "It's okay, Carlos. Grandma can kiss it better if you want." Our eyes met over the child's head, a moment of understanding passing between us. She was acknowledging my way of comforting wasn't harmful, just different from hers. And I had demonstrated respect for her boundaries by pausing before automatically doing what came naturally to me. "All better?" I asked, after placing a gentle kiss near the bandage, careful not to make it seem like the kiss itself had magical healing properties. Carlos nodded, already distracted by a seagull landing nearby. The crisis that had once spiraled into years of estrangement was now just a minor childhood incident, handled with mutual respect. That evening, as we prepared dinner together, Bree raised the subject of her parents' upcoming visit. "They'll be here next Wednesday," she confirmed. "I've reserved their room at the Sea Breeze Inn as you suggested. They're welcome to join us for meals and activities," I assured her. "I know the children are looking forward to seeing them." She hesitated, then added, "They can be difficult sometimes, critical, especially my mother." This was the most she'd ever shared about her relationship with her own parents. I chose my response carefully, not wanting to lose this moment of vulnerability. "Family relationships are complicated," I acknowledged. "But this is your vacation. You don't have to manage everyone else's feelings at the expense of your own enjoyment." She looked surprised, as if the concept of prioritizing her own experience was novel. "I've always been the peacekeeper," she admitted, "since I was a child." "That's a heavy burden to carry," I observed gently. "It is." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "My mother has never approved of anything I do. Not my career choices, not my parenting, nothing. It's exhausting always trying to meet impossible standards." The pieces continued to fall into place. Bree's controlling nature with her children, her anxiety about being judged as a mother, her resistance to my involvement, all stemmed from her own experiences with a hypercritical parent. "You don't have to be your mother," I said carefully. "And I don't have to be her either," she looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean that perhaps you've been attributing her attitudes and intentions to me because that's the only model of a grandmother you've known. But we can create something different, something healthier." She didn't respond directly, but the thoughtful expression on her face told me my words had landed. We continued preparing dinner in companionable silence, the understanding between us deepening without need for further discussion. The next few days settled into a new rhythm. No longer carefully supervised, I began spending quality time with both children, helping Sola create her marine laboratory on the deck, building a driftwood fort with Carlos on the beach. Austin and Bree seemed more relaxed as well, allowing themselves to enjoy the vacation rather than constantly monitoring interactions. For the first time, it felt like a true family visit rather than a negotiated peace treaty. We weren't perfect. There were still occasional misunderstandings, moments of old tensions resurfacing. But now we had tools to address them directly, instead of letting resentment build. One evening, as I sat on the deck watching the sunset while the others were inside, playing a board game, Austin joined me, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "Thought you might like some company," he said, offering me a glass. "Always," I replied, patting the chair beside me. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky transform from blue to pink to deep orange. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said finally. "For everything. For letting it go on so long. For not standing up sooner." "You were caught in the middle," I acknowledged. "That's never an easy place to be. Still, I should have done better. I let fear of conflict with Bree override everything else. My relationship with you, the children's relationship with their grandmother. It was cowardly." "Not cowardly," I corrected gently. "Human. We all make mistakes, especially when trying to balance competing loyalties." He took a sip of wine, then asked, "Do you think we can really move forward from this? Create something healthy?" I considered the question seriously. "I do. Not because it will be easy, but because we're all committed to trying. That's more than half the battle right there." As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settling over me. The road ahead wouldn't be perfectly smooth. Bree's parents would arrive in a few days, bringing their own complex dynamics. Old patterns would occasionally reassert themselves. Rebuilding trust would take time, but the essential foundation had been laid. My place in my grandchildren's lives was no longer contingent on providing vacation accommodations or following restrictive rules. It was acknowledged as a right and a relationship worth preserving for everyone's benefit. That night, as I listened to the familiar sound of waves breaking on the shore, I felt genuine hope for our future as a family. Not perfect, not without challenges, but connected in the ways that truly matter. Carter and Edith Miller arrived on Wednesday as planned, bringing with them a new dynamic to our carefully rebuilt family harmony. From the moment they stepped onto my property, I understood much more about Bree's behavior. Edith Miller was a meticulously groomed woman in her early 70s, her silver hair perfectly styled, her linen outfit unwrinkled despite the summer heat. Her first words upon entering my home were not a greeting but an assessment. "Quite rustic, isn't it?" she remarked, glancing around my lovingly restored living room with barely concealed disapproval. "I suppose that's the charm of beach cottages." My house was many things, carefully designed, thoughtfully renovated, filled with quality furnishings I'd selected over decades, but rustic wasn't one of them. The subtle dismissal was clearly intentional, designed to establish her superiority from the outset. Carter, her husband, seemed pleasant enough but deferential to his wife in a way that reminded me of Austin's behavior with Bree. The path of least resistance, the habitual peacekeeper. "It's a beautiful home," he offered with an apologetic smile in my direction. "Thank you for allowing us to visit." Watching Bree interact with her mother was like viewing the origins of a river, seeing exactly where certain patterns had begun. Edith criticized everything, from Bree's outfit, "That color washes you out, dear," to her handling of the children. "Carlos needs a haircut. He looks unkempt." With each comment, I saw Bree tense, then force a smile, trying harder to meet impossible standards. But I also noticed something unexpected, a new awareness in her eyes, as if she was observing her mother's behavior with fresh perspective. During dinner, Edith turned her critical gaze on Sola's table manners. "A young lady doesn't put her elbows on the table," she reprimanded sharply when Sola leaned forward in excitement while describing a starfish we'd found. I waited for Bree to echo the correction, to align with her mother as she'd done with previous comments. Instead, Bree said calmly, "She's fine, Mom. She's excited about her discovery." Edith looked startled, then displeased. "Well, I'm just saying. Proper manners are important. Susan, don't you agree?" It was a trap, an attempt to force me to either contradict Bree or align with criticism of my granddaughter. I chose a third path. "I think Sola's enthusiasm for marine biology is wonderful," I replied warmly. "And I'm enjoying hearing about her discoveries." Bree shot me a grateful look across the table. In that moment, I realized something important was happening. Bree was seeing the contrast between her mother's critical approach and my supportive one. And perhaps for the first time, she was recognizing that not all grandmothers are the same. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, I found Bree alone on the deck, staring out at the moonlit ocean. "Your mother is quite particular," I observed mildly, joining her at the railing. Bree laughed, a short, humorless sound. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. She's judgmental, controlling, and never satisfied. Welcome to my entire childhood." "It explains a lot," I said gently. She looked at me sharply. "About me, you mean? About the pressures you've been under? About certain patterns that might have felt normal because they were familiar?" She was quiet for a long moment, then admitted, "I've been in therapy for years trying to unlearn her voice in my head. That constant internal critic telling me I'm not good enough, not doing it right, always failing somehow." "You're a wonderful mother, Bree," I said sincerely. "The children are thriving, happy, secure in your love. That's what matters, not whether Carlos's hair is perfectly trimmed or Sola keeps her elbows off the table." "Logically, I know that," she sighed. "Emotionally, it's harder." "Of course it is. We all carry our childhoods with us, for better or worse." She turned to face me directly. I think I was afraid of becoming my mother. And somehow, in trying so hard not to be her, I adopted some of her worst traits: the control, the rigidity, the fear of outside influences. This level of self-awareness and honesty was new, a significant breakthrough in our relationship. "Recognizing patterns is the first step to changing them," I offered. "And Bree, you're already a better mother than she was. I see it in how the children trust you, how they come to you with their thoughts and feelings openly." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears in the moonlight. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." The next few days brought more revealing interactions. Edith continued her stream of criticisms, but now I noticed Bree responding differently, sometimes setting gentle boundaries, sometimes simply not engaging with the negativity. Austin, too, seemed to be finding his voice, no longer automatically, deferring to either his wife or his mother-in-law. On their third day, I took both grandchildren to the ice cream shop downtown, their first solo outing with me since before the estrangement. As we sat at a picnic table enjoying our treats, Carlos looked up at me with ice cream-smeared cheeks. "Grandma, why doesn't Grandma Edith like anything?" out of the mouths of babes. I considered my response carefully, aware of the delicacy of discussing another adult with a child. "Some people have a harder time finding joy in the world," I explained. "They focus on trying to make things perfect instead of enjoying things as they are." "Like my ice cream?" he asked, pointing to his messy cone. "She said I was making a disaster, but it's just melting 'cause it's hot." "Exactly," I agreed. "Ice cream melts. That's what it does on hot days. You can either worry about the mess or enjoy the sweetness while it lasts." Sola, ever perceptive, added, "Mom seems different when Grandma Edith is here. More worried." Your mom wants everyone to be happy, I said. Sometimes that's hard work, especially when people have different ideas about what's important. I like how you don't make Mom worried, Sola declared, finishing her strawberry cone. You make her laugh sometimes now. It was true. Over the past week, Bree and I had found moments of genuine connection, sharing knowing looks when Edith made particularly outrageous comments, laughing together over the children's antics, finding common ground in our desire to create a healthy family dynamic. The Millers' visit lasted 3 days, and while it added stress to our newfound equilibrium, it also accelerated the healing process in unexpected ways. Nothing clarifies your own patterns like seeing them mirrored in someone else. For Bree, watching her mother's critical, controlling behavior helped her recognize those same tendencies in herself. For Austin, observing Carter's passive acceptance of Edith's dominance highlighted his own conflict avoidance. And for me, understanding the family dynamic Bree had grown up with created deeper empathy for her struggles as a mother, her fear of inadequacy, her need for control in a world that had always made her feel powerless. On the Millers' final evening, after a dinner punctuated by Edith's usual critiques, Bree made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Mom, Dad, I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "We need to discuss some new boundaries for our relationship going forward." Edith looked affronted. "Boundaries? What on earth are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the constant criticism, the unrealistic standards, the undermining of my parenting. It's not healthy, not for me, not for the children, not for any of us." Austin reached over to take his wife's hand, a silent show of support that clearly strengthened her resolve. "Now, Brianna," Edith began, using Bree's full name in a tone that suggested she was being childish. "If you perceive constructive guidance as criticism, that's hardly—" "It's not constructive," Bree interrupted firmly. "It's hurtful, and it stops now, or we'll need to rethink how often we can visit." The silence that followed was electric. Carter looked distinctly uncomfortable. Austin seemed both surprised and proud, and I felt a surge of admiration for Bree's courage in confronting the source of so much of her pain. "Well," Edith finally said, her voice brittle, "I can see we're not appreciated here. Perhaps we should leave first thing in the morning." "That's your choice," Bree replied evenly, "but I hope you'll consider what I've said and decide to stay. I don't want less contact with you. I want healthier contact." It was a masterful response, clear, firm, but not escalating the conflict. I couldn't help but wonder if our own hard conversations had given Bree practice in setting boundaries with respect rather than reactivity. The evening ended awkwardly, with Edith retreating to her hotel in injured silence and Carter following apologetically. But as we cleared the dinner dishes, Bree seemed lighter, as if setting that boundary had released a burden she'd carried for decades. "I've never spoken to her like that before," she admitted as we loaded the dishwasher. "Never stood up to her so directly." "You did it with grace and clarity," I told her. "I'm proud of you." She looked at me with surprise. "You are?" "Of course. Setting healthy boundaries is hard work, especially with parents. It takes courage." Austin joined us, wrapping an arm around Bree's shoulders. It was impressive, and long overdue. The three of us finished cleaning in companionable silence, a new understanding flowing between us. We'd all grown in different ways during this vacation, Bree finding her voice, Austin learning to stand firm rather than always seeking the path of least resistance, me discovering how to assert my needs while respecting others' boundaries, and, through it all, Sola and Carlos had flourished, soaking up the love of multiple generations, learning from our mistakes and our efforts to correct them. That night, as I prepared for bed, I found a handwritten note slipped under my door. In Bree's neat handwriting, it read, "Susan, thank you for showing me what a supportive mother-in-law and grandmother looks like. I'm learning, slowly but surely, and I'm grateful for your patience as I figure it out. Bree. I folded the note carefully and placed it in my bedside drawer, next to the photo of David. Progress wasn't always dramatic or definitive. Sometimes it came in small moments, quiet acknowledgments, tentative steps toward a healthier future. We were healing, all of us, in our own ways and at our own pace. And that, I realized, was the most precious gift my beach house had ever provided. Not just shelter or vacation enjoyment, but space for a family to find its way back to love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.